We'll see if this works. YouTube is one of the most demanding taskmasters of data, and I'm out here roaming the streets of Tequisquiapan upon Mexico right around sunset. There comes a moto. Motos can go anywhere. And I just thought I'd go live with a little Real Mexico for you guys. I'm down near Centro. It's muy bonita down near Centro. And at this time of day, I've actually been out doing some street photography and just been kind of exploring the Centro area. But I thought I'd do a little video as we walked here. It's a wine tasting room over there. Look at that. Tasty. I thought we'd do, hey guys, I see you in there. Good to see you. Shout out to all of you guys as I walk the streets down here. I thought I'd do a little video as I walk through Centro and talk about things that you don't see in Mexico, because I think it's what you don't see that's perhaps the most significant. You know, I talk about how there's real economics and you know, there's such neat stuff. Yeah, that dam yesterday was pretty cool, but it's constant. There's these amazing things. Watch as we come out into Centro here. You know, the sun's setting on the cathedral out here, and the birds are chirping, as I'm sure you can hear. And as we swing out into Centro, you know, you can see the birds and you can see the cathedral back there. It's very cool. It's total beat-in. So that's neat, right? And I do a lot of videos. Showing neat things circa Mexico. But it's what you don't see in Mexico that really is shocking. Let me tell you a couple things that you don't see in Mexico. You don't see la policía beating people on the side of the road. That's not something that you see. You don't even see videos of that, because that kind of behavior is not okay. You don't see the children with glassed over, drugged up eyes because of all the antidepressants. That's not something that's common here either. The kids are alive, and if a little boy, for example, is energetic and rambunctious, they don't give him drugs. They give him something to do. You don't see the teenagers completely off in their own world, unable to do anything in a comprehensible manner because society has them so dumbed down. You don't see school shootings in Mexico. Whatever's going on in the U.S., and rest assured that our government is involved some way in the U.S. because they get this narrative, this propaganda of control and slavery and fear, as they make up false narratives and use their fake courts to convict people in fake trials for crimes that they may or may not have committed, that no evidence was even presented for. I have a serious question with all these school shootings. If society drugs up its children to be mindless, conscienceless, and unaware, when society does that and calls it healthcare, who is to blame when the drugged up, mindless people do terrible things? Honestly, who is to blame? Is the person that was drugged up and didn't have their own mind and weren't raised with their own mind responsible, or is the people who sold that in the name of health responsible? But that's just one more thing you don't see in Mexico. There's been one school shooting ever in Mexico, as far as I can tell, and it was in a school run by a U.S. company. Go figure. What else don't you see in Mexico? You don't see the level of complete asleepness, right? You don't see the outrage from the people against those that are standing up. Look at these streets. These streets are narrow. They're good to walk or bicycle because they're small and they're all over the place. All right? You don't see in Mexico people ostracized and having to flee their own country like I've been faced with for speaking out. You don't see the populace slinging insults and telling you should be castrated and put in prison because you point the finger and say that's corruption. You don't see the complete mindlessness to the hypocrisy of the government. That's not to say that there is not any corruption, because there is. But what you don't see is people being completely ignorant and something happening one day that's completely damning to, say, a politician, and the next day it goes out of the news cycle and everyone just forgets about it. They have longer memories here, and they're paying a bit more attention. People are people everywhere, right? People are distracted by life, and they're distracted by media and by politics. You don't see the constant nationalist propaganda. This is very important. You don't see people worshiping the police. That's probably one of the number one ways they've taken our freedom in Estados Unidos, is you do not see this mindless subservience. If a police officer pulls you over on the side of the road, and you and a couple of your friends are in the car, it would be totally normal for you to get out of the car and stand face to face with him and figure out what he wants, right? You're not some subservient that if you get out of your car, you'll be executed on the side of the road. That's not tolerated. That's a pretty yard right in there. A lot of these things you don't see. You don't see the constant and massive regulation. You don't see everything controlled to the point where you can't even run a business. And so, people will then counter this by saying, it's super corrupt there. They don't have any justice or due process. And what they're doing is projecting what the USA has become. The USA does not have any courts of law. You can't get due process anymore in the United States because the judges are completely complicit. Whereas, to the contrary, in Mexico, they're actually progressing forward to improve their justice system and make it more public and more accountable. People say, "Oh, there's no guns in Mexico." That's false. It's just not reality. There are some bad gun laws, but the fact is, you have probably less gun rights in the U.S. than in Mexico. Not because of what's on the books, but because in the States, you just go to prison for any violation. I see people going to prison all the time on these trumped up bogus gun charges, right? It's constant. Whereas here, they have, restrictions and permits for guns that shouldn't exist, and yet there's protest groups and militia groups that flagrantly run around the streets with machine guns mounted on their vehicles in some states, because they say those laws are not relevant and we have rights. There's lots of the population that has a gun under their bed, and they just say, no, that's our right to protect our family. The difference is people aren't going to federal prison in Mexico every day for possessing a gun, for ignoring that law. So in point of fact, that's another thing you don't see, is prisons filled with people who did nothing. Now, that's not to say that their prison system is just, but the population of their prison system per capita is a third to a quarter of the USA. That says a lot. They don't have private for-profit prisons in Mexico. You don't see this mindset of, let's put everybody in jail because they had a beer and they were driving. Let's try and set up traps to get them. Let's punish and enslave everyone. You don't see the absolute submission to tyranny in Mexico that you see in the USA. So let's summarize, right? I'm going to be getting back to the car soon. Let's summarize what you don't see. You don't see drugged up kids shooting each other in schools. You don't see mindless zombies in your 6-year-olds because their parents are giving them drugs because they're too lazy to let them be real children and be a little rambunctious. You don't see police murdering people in the streets. You don't see prisons being filled with people for guns or plants. In fact, it looks like marijuana may actually be fully opened up this year. But even at that, their prison system isn't full of people who were locked away in a for-profit prison because they had a few ounces of an herb. You don't see the mindless subservience to police and government. Do you still see corruption? Is there problems? Abso-freaking-lutely. But is there a whole lot more freedom? Yeah. Yeah, it's not even close. And so as the loyalist trolls try to make excuses for the tyranny they support, as they try to call names to those who stand up and who resist and who say no more, don't let them get to you. They're too cowardly to stand up. They're too cowardly to resist. And remember this: standing for freedom is refusing tyranny. And if you can do that, if your people start doing that, then you'll really get somewhere. As long as you allow the cowards and trolls and loyalists to the system to control your narrative and say that courage is obeying the government, that freedom is submitting to the fake authorities, the fake courts, and the fake cops, as long as that's our narrative and we don't take back the truth, our nation will continue to be slaves. But most importantly, as long as we don't care about justice, even for the person that we hate or that we think did something terrible, as long as we're a lynch mob that says hang them high because the propaganda says that they were bad people, as long as we're willing to submit to becoming the lynch mob that loves the suffering of others, as long as we get what we want, we can never, ever be free.